Welcome to Psychology at Work. I'm Dr. Paul Brewerton, otherwise known as the Strengths Guy. As a doctor of psychology and the founder and chair of Strengthscope, I'm here to share my insights with you. Tune in for a regular dose of positive, strengths-based content. My podcasts are packed full of tips and tools designed to enhance your world of work. Ready to dive into the good stuff in this episode? Then let's go. Hi, my name is Dr. Paul Brewerton, the Strengths Guy, Doctor of Organizational Psychology and founder and chair of Strengthscope. Today we have on the show Rachel Carrell, CEO of Koru Kids. Hello, Rachel.
Hello. Thanks for having
Really
me.
good to see you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for giving us your time. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to intro Rachel. Rachel is the CEO of Koru Kids, building the world's best childcare service. Previously, Rachel was CEO of Dr. Tom, a healthcare company which she grew to 1.3 million paying users in 3 countries. And before that, she spent 6 years at McKinsey. Rachel has a DPhil from Oxford, where she was a Rhodes Scholar. She is a current WEF Young Global Leader. Rachel was named Best Businesswoman in Technology at the 2017 Best Business Women Awards, and also won the Inspirational Mother Award at the 2017 Inspiration Awards. What a bio.
Sounds like someone else when you read it.
It's incredible. Does it really?
Yeah.
It's you. It's definitely
Who's
you.
that person? Yeah.
So also thank you for completing Strengthscope before today. And we'll get into that shortly to talk about strengths, risks, and all that good stuff. But I'd love in our conversation today, if we could, to cover your career, which I just trailed in the intro, and you said it sounded like someone else, but it's definitely all you. And then get into the parts of what you do today that you love and the parts that you don't love so much, and bring the strengths piece into that as well. So I'd love also to get into a conversation about finding incredible nannies and how you do that at Koru Kids, also strengths in leadership and in entrepreneurism and your views there. And I think that's loads. So that's enough. Let's kick off.
Cool.
So could you tell us a bit more about your story, your career story to date than I just trailed there in the intro? So how you got to where you got to today and what key decision points brought you here?
Yeah, cool. So I was born in New Zealand. I left New Zealand when I was 21. And I've now spent about half my life in New Zealand and about half my life in Britain. So I feel like I'm genuinely kind of half. And I did my undergrad in New Zealand. I'm from a very small farming town on the south coast of the South Island.
Mm-hmm.
Very much grew up in like what felt even at that time like the periphery, and I always kind of wanted to be in the center of things. So
Yeah.
I really feel like the first, 30 years of my life were just me kind of gradually moving towards what I felt was the center of things. And so I did my undergrad in New Zealand, came over here and did a master's and then a DPhil, and then worked at McKinsey. And I always was a generalist. I never wanted to specialize in anything.
Mm-hmm.
I did a multidisciplinary undergrad, multidisciplinary master's. At McKinsey, I did a little bit of everything, and I never wanted to specialize. And then finally, I was forced to, and I specialized in healthcare at the last possible moment.
Right.
And anyway, and then I left McKinsey and was very lucky to get a job as a CEO out of McKinsey.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was in that role, had my first baby. Got 3 kids, got a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And when I had that first baby, I started experiencing childcare for the first time, the childcare system or the lack of system. And up until that time, my life had really been this series of systems that made sense. I worked hard and I got up the ladder, whichever ladder it was, and then I worked hard and I got up the next bit, worked hard and got up the next bit. And it was just a series of kind of very rational systems. And when I experienced childcare for the first time, it was the first time in my life that I had been in it that there was no system, or it really didn't make sense. And I started hearing all these stories from my friends about how they couldn't afford childcare. They were moving out of London when they didn't want to. They were giving up these careers that I knew how hard they'd worked to get in the first place. They were making profound decisions like deciding not to have a child or another child because they couldn't afford it, really big stuff. And so I decided to work on that problem and to take everything I'd learned from healthcare and building good systems and apply it to childcare. And so at Koru Kids, what we're doing is we're building new childcare systems.
Unbelievable. That is amazing. So I'm really interested in like the whole, being a generalist.
Yeah.
What do you put that down to? Like was that not wanting to switch stuff off? Like because where did it come from?
So I think I've always wanted to keep my options open and until the last possible moment. And I'm just interested in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I just have a minor interest in almost everything.
Yeah.
And so I had peers who became partners at McKinsey very quickly because they focused on one thing and they got really good at it. And that was the fast track to promotion.
Yeah.
And I knew that was the fast track to promotion, but I didn't want that.
Yeah.
So at every stage, I took a very slow, meandering path. Because I was constantly going back to square one and learning stuff again. So I worked in about 10 different industries. I worked in like 7 or 8 different countries. I kept physically moving around the world, working with different people. I just wanted to I wanted to live as many lives as possible. I was just really greedy for life experiences.
Yeah.
So I worked in Siberia, the only non-Russian on a team of Russians. I worked in South Africa. I worked in New York, in Manhattan, and Sydney, and in the oil fields in Stavanger and in Norway. I mean, in a copper mine in Utah with Mormons. I just wanted to experience all these different crazy things, in in Sainsbury's, which doesn't sound exotic, but it was to me at the time. Yeah.
And I guess that has given you then. I mean, you talked about the healthcare specialism and the healthcare, knowledge, and then being able to take that into something like childcare, like being able to take that kind of systemic view, but also an eclectic view, taken from a lot of different places, what good looks like, what great looks like, what it doesn't look like from a systems perspective, and say, right, what's best of all of that we can now deploy in childcare.
Exactly. I mean, I'm a massive believer in serendipity. I don't behave in terms of my own career. I've never been strategic about it, obviously, but I do believe in increasing your luck surface area. I don't know if you've heard that phrase.
No, I love it. Is that yours? Did you come up with that?
I didn't come up. I can't remember where I read it, but it's
really good.
But I do believe in it very much. The idea that like the more people you meet, the more surface area you have, the more opportunities you will notice. And if you have the mindset to grab them, and maybe that'll come into some of the other strengths. You need the preparation plus the opportunity plus the moment, right? You need all those things. And but just you can't just have the preparation. You need to increase your luck surface area. So I was a big believer in that. And looking back on it, I think what I was doing was actually perfect preparation to become a CEO. I've been a CEO in various guises for the last 10 years now. And as a CEO, the CEO role in particular is one where you do have to be kind of all right at a whole bunch of incredibly different things, to be able to deal with lots of different people. You have to do lots of persuading and sales, but you have to know a little bit about marketing. You have to be good with numbers. You have to be able to engage with the tech as much, to some degree. Like you have to be a kind of a thin layer on everything. And so actually it turned out it was really good training.
I've got this question about that, right? And it came up today with some conversations I was having around that kind of general, as you say, kind of being able to be on the surface and see what's going on at a macro level, but then diving in where you need to into those verticals, into those different discipline areas, like you've mentioned. And I just wonder for you how deep you go with that. Do you feel the need? Because you said you're curious about lots of stuff, right? Like everything's of interest. But do you feel the need to go deep, or do you how does it work when you're working with a subject specialist, someone who's, you've brought in as a professional in marketing or in sales or whatever, do you want to go really deep and to understand their world fully, or are you happy with their expertise level and, you're expert in being the CEO, if that makes sense?
I think I naturally stay a bit too shallow, honestly. I think I go somewhat deep, But the people who I admire, if you were to say, you know, who do I think like really do a good job? They might not be famous CEOs, but these are just like friends of mine who I think are really good at it.
Mm.
I am always very impressed when I hear, oh, you know, we lost our chief marketing officer, and while we were recruiting another one, I had to be CMO, and you know, I really went deep, and I like rejigged our something. Like, I love those stories. I think that's so cool. I think that is absolutely the right way to do it. But that is something that I don't want to do. I have to force myself to do it.
Yeah.
So when I say I'm interested in everything, I'm this much.
Yeah. Well, you actually said it like that. I think you said
Right.
something like, you know, like I'm what did you say? Mildly interested in almost everything. Like
Yeah.
which is exactly that, right?
Quite interested. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Okay, great. So, I think because I've got this question about decision points, like key decision points, like those turning points that people have in their careers. Is there any that you haven't mentioned? I mean, I think you probably already did, you know, like there's this, yeah, you've probably covered that off. I think let's go, unless you've got anything else you want to add on that. I want to ask you about, you know, but go ahead if you have.
No, I mean, I think there's been a few major turning points. Like moving geographically is always a major turning point.
Yeah.
Obviously, moving to the UK, staying in the UK for me after I graduated was a big one, and totally not obvious at all. In fact, I tried to leave and I couldn't. And then, you know, so always when you take a new job, that's always a big decision. Founding Koru Kids and going out on my own, and then we pivoted quite early on. That was a tough decision. But we were trying to do something and it wasn't working. And then, you know, who you key early hires. And then the biggest decision in anyone's life is who you spend your life with. And, you know, my partner's been incredibly important in my whole journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's a lot of key decision points. And that's like through life, but you know, we have them all the time, right? I mean, we're making decisions constantly. Okay. Which may or may not bring us to my next question, which is around what do you love most about what you do? And I guess I'm asking that from a strengths perspective, but I'm also asking that from a purpose perspective, right? So, you know, I feel the energy and the passion that you have for Koru Kids, and you know the purpose of Koru Kids based on your own experiences, based on seeing a problem that you knew was solvable, or that you know you felt you really wanted to weigh in and give it a good go, and have done and have demonstrated that. But I also wonder from a strengths perspective, you know, when you did the Strengthscope profile, you had your you know, your briefing on it. What kind of pinged out for you from that you thought, yeah, actually, this is the stuff that I love the most about work?
Yeah, I think for me, purpose is completely critical. And I have never actually done a job, I think that's right, that where I couldn't connect to the purpose of that job. For me, it's an essential component. And at Koru Kids, we are really trying to change this very neglected infrastructure of childcare. And so we're very, very mission driven. I think the actual activity day to day that gives me the most energy. I actually kept a little diary of this for a while.
Oh, awesome.
I was very interested to know, rather than me just kind of imagining. I think sometimes it's much more true when you note it down in the moment, what is energizing you. And anything to do with marketing, but particularly creating marketing content is the thing that most energizes me. I always say, if I could do one role in my company that wasn't my own, I would actually be like our copywriter. And I love the whole team. They know this. They know how much I love copywriting and copy editing. So whenever we do customer emails or a newsletter or any copy, they'll often pass it by me. Partly because they want my view, or they want me to add some stuff, but I think they know it also just makes me really happy.
Yeah. So what is it about that? What's going on with that as an activity that, you know, what's the underlying thing that you're enjoying?
I love words. I love the I literally just really love editing. It's like doing for me it's a mindful relaxation exercise.
Yeah.
I actually have to like consciously not do it because I really would be very happy if I was doing it all the time, and it is not my actual job.
Yeah.
And the other one, so in terms of the strengths, I think there is a major connection here which is, I think, to courage. So courage came up pretty strong. I think it was maybe my top one. I'm just looking at the thing. And it's interesting because I hadn't really thought about that before, but I do, both in myself and in others, hugely value courage. And I was reflecting on this, and I was thinking, I actually identified it as because of doing this. I actually identified that I get frustrated with other people when I think they're not showing courage. And I think it's because I don't understand, I don't get it. And so doing this exercise made me realize, oh, actually, I may be a little bit of an outlier on courage. And therefore it's not really fair of me to like judge people for that. And for me also, it was interesting because often when you say courage is a weird one. When I hear it, I think like physical courage, you know, and I don't have physical courage, you know. I don't particularly like heights or fights. I don't like heights or fights. You know, I'm not your girl for like fighting off a whatever. But I could actually think of a number of times in my life where I have zero problem. In fact, it does actually give me energy, like standing up for things that I believe in.
That's it. That's the definition.
At whatever social price. I actually don't, I genuinely do not care. I don't see a social price. I mean, that literally is the definition. I don't actually care.
Yeah.
If I think it's right.
Yeah.
And what I think goes along with that is I don't actually think I'm right that much. So like it's quite rare. I think I'm right a lot less than some people think they're right. So it has to get above a certain threshold, which for me, it doesn't get above that much. So it's not, I don't go, maybe this is why it was a little surprising to me to see this, because I don't go around, like when I say, oh, I stand up for what I believe in, when I hear that, I think of someone who's very annoying and like doing it all the time. I actually don't do it all the time. I only do it when, like, it's a handful of times in my life and it's when I feel like I am certain about something, so nearly certain, and also other people are getting it wrong. And that combination doesn't happen that much, because normally if I'm really certain, normally other people are fairly certain too.
Yeah.
Normally if it's something where, you know, other people, so it's that combo is reasonably rare, but I do kind of stand up for that. Anyway, to bring it back to the connection to marketing, and our purpose, what we do is we do a lot of campaigning. So we are a campaigning organization, and that feels very true to me to do that. And so we do a lot of campaigning around childcare. Well, I just this morning on LinkedIn, I did a little LinkedIn post about Labour and Sure Start, and how I think they should bring back Sure Start. So this is like quite a party political, you know, kind of high politics campaigning. And I think the bit where the courage comes in is that this is actually an example of where I'm really certain about this. Like they really definitely need to bring back Sure Start. Like it's very evidence-based. I won't go into, you know, the campaign itself, but it's, to me, it's so clear, and they're not planning to do it. So it is actually that combination of like, I really feel like I am right, and also they're not doing it. So it feels like it's worth saying.
Yeah.
And so writing that post, I was definitely the highlight, aside from talking to you, definitely the highlight of my day. And a lot of fun. And I get to make jokes and be a bit silly while I'm just like a dumb joke about a horse. Quite a rude joke.
That's such a brilliant exposition description of using a strength to get more from your day, to get more from your life, right? I mean, you've said it, you've used it in, you know, like at there's points in time when you've brought your courage strength out to play. It doesn't happen all that often, but actually from a day-to-day point of view, if it relates to campaigning, if it relates to communication about campaigning, about something you're deeply passionate in, you know, like something you're invested in and passionate about, then your courage strength is going to be in play, because it is about that vocal defense of your values, the stuff that's really important to you, and being energized by vocally and, you know, evidently defending your values that's in a really public forum, you know. So yeah, I think that's it's just a brilliant kind of, I don't know, self appreciation of self when it comes to a strength that's really defining. for you? And I guess as well, I mean, you haven't mentioned initiative, but initiating that, deciding that I'm going to be the one that solves this problem, that I'm going to be the one who puts out the call to action to bring this back as a program, must be part of it. But I don't want to put words in your mouth, right? I mean,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you and I were saying, you mentioned like what are the traits of entrepreneurs, and it's almost by definition. I mean, an entrepreneur is a person who starts a new thing, or a founder is the person who starts a new thing. That is literally what initiative is. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So
energy for initiating.
I'm pretty active in the London founder communities. And one of the things I find really funny about them is there are lots of kind of like trips away and events and stuff. And the founder community, when you get kind of 100 founders and you're going on a ski trip with them, or you're going on a night out in London, whatever it is, they're a complete nightmare to manage because every single person thinks they're an exceptional human being, that they don't need to follow the rules, which is just like a terrible thing. But the flip side of that is when there is a crisis and something goes wrong, that is the best possible group of people you can be with, because every single person has like a lot of initiative. And kind of any problem that arises, people just like solve it. It's brilliant. So
because they have to do it all the time, right?
Yeah. So I was with this founders group, one of these founders groups, on a ski trip in Spain. We were skiing on, I want to get this date right, it's important. I think it was March the 14th, 2020, if that date means anything to you. And I probably got that date wrong, but anyway, it was the day.
Oh, was that lockdown?
Yeah. No, it was in the UK. It was like the 20th or something. But in Spain, anyway, the point is the Spanish border closed.
Okay.
We were like stuck. And but it closed with a few hours notice. And so with a few hours notice, and we were all flying out of France, so we had to get back to France and get on those planes. And it was just, people just took their phones out and started making calls. And within 20 minutes, there were minivans were arriving, and we'd shut everything down, and we'd taken back the things early, and everything was arranged, and the flights were, and everyone was just pitching in. It was just done. And it was, that to me was the greatest illustration of this one initiative.
I love it. It's such a good example. So I have another observation, right? And it relates to the fact that you're even in a founders group of 100, which may mark you out from some entrepreneurs, from some founders, from some CEOs, but you also have a relationship building strength. Like that initiation again of new relationships, of loving to meet people, to connect with people, to connect people with people. That typically marks out someone who brings a relationship building strength, and not everyone has it.
I definitely, that resonates a lot. I'm definitely often the person, I've often had friends say to me, everyone, that's the thing that people will say to me, oh, Rachel knows everyone, or everyone. And I think I would contrast myself with my husband. He also has a big circle, but he is a lot better than me at doing very deep relationships. He still hangs out with his friends from primary school, which is just incredible. And he really, really invests in those deep relationships. I wish I did mine. I mean, mine are in New Zealand. I don't live there anymore. And so I'm someone who I like going to kind of big gatherings, not all the time, but I like that. He absolutely hates it. He just wants to go to the pub with his one friend that he's known for a long time. Or
I think you're describing the difference between the collaboration strength driven person and the relationship building strength driven person, because collaboration people tend to go deep with a smaller number and get real energy from that. And relationship building, it tends to be a lot of people, but not as deep. You can go deep, but it's not. And
I mean, I'm inspired by him. I see how wonderful that is. But for me, what it does mean is I do know a lot of people, and especially in the early days, I got a lot done that way, and that was really, really important for a couple of reasons in Koru Kids. One was just practically, I didn't know anything about anything. Like the number of decisions you need to make, tiny things about, what payroll software we're going to use. Oh, someone wants a visa sponsored. Like, is that even a thing? Where do I start thinking about that?
Yeah.
Whatever. There's a million things like that when you're starting a business. And I basically crowdsourced from my network, and that was how I did everything.
Brilliant.
For the first at least kind of 2-3 years. And then I think I got kind of, I became actually one of the elder members of the community. And now I give back. Now I answer other people's questions, which is cool. But what it then became was much more emotional support. And, being an entrepreneur is very, very much highs and lows, as everyone knows, and learning and all of that. And so having groups of people who fully understood what I was going through and, you could talk to very, very honestly was critical, absolutely critical. So that skill has been very, very important to me.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that there are entrepreneurs that don't join these communities, because I know some, and I don't know how they do it. I don't, I've talked to people who say, oh yeah, I don't like that kind of, I don't know, I'm not into that kind of thing. I was like, really?
Yeah, because they, people are powered by different strengths, right?
Yeah.
So I think, if you've got a collaboration strength, but not a relationship building strength, but you still need to crowdsource all the stuff, guess what you do? You go to the 5 or 6 people in your community, one of whom is the relationship builder, and you ask them to connect you with the right people. That's the way, because, there's always a way. There's always a way with strengths. It's just like, you kind of got to think around it a little bit, and then you get the same outcome. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I love that. Like when you're looking at entrepreneurs who are not plugged into those networks in that way, and kind of going, how are you even energized? But it will be there, they'll do it their way. And whatever that way is. Some people, it's just like, it's all about results. It's like results. That's the thing. I'm going to get this ticked off and that ticked off, and then I'll do this and then I'll do that. For others, it's about a plan, creating, then following that through. And that's the thing that really energizes them. So yeah, I mean, I think that there are probably certain strengths that are helpful in particular lines of work or professions or vocations. But fundamentally, you can use any combination of strengths to get any job done.
I think the two things you just mentioned, the plan and results, which do not appear in my strengths. I think I have always complimented myself with someone who has those.
Yeah,
that's been very important. So within my company, I've always had a very strong COO. And I've had 2. So in the Koru Kids has now been going for 8 years. 2 different COOs, and they absolutely had to have those strengths to complement mine.
Yeah, totally. And that's a brilliant strength strategy, right? Where you go, okay, I've got what I've got, but I know I don't have everything, and I'm okay with that. Like, it'd be lovely if I did, but I know that I don't. So who has got those strengths that I know that I need to get stuff done? Let's go find those people. And that's, because the contrary approach, right, which is actually still the traditional approach with development, is that you focus in on the things that you don't have, and that you then develop those in the somehow, hope that that's going to paper over the cracks and you're going to be able to be really good at everything. No, like our argument would be, and, the research shows that isn't necessarily going to be the best way. You're better borrowing others' strengths, because they're going to feel energized by the doing of that, unless you have a draining area which can really get in the way of your career. Because if you don't address it, it's just going to get you into trouble, and you can't use other strengths to achieve the same outcome that strength could have given you, if that makes sense. So we're moving into talking about risk areas, right? And you're touching on it really well. Like, that's a great strategy. If you don't have certain strengths, but you know that you need them, go find them, hire them in, or borrow them, if you're not in that position to hire them in. Find them in your team, find them in your colleague set, find them in your network somewhere, and then you can use them. But what about strengths in overdrive? Like, you've talked about strengths that really define you, that are you at your best. Are there any where you feel, there's a risk of overplaying them, where you're kind of aware that the energy has its own life and it can run away with itself a bit?
Yeah, definitely. So one of them that sticks out, I think, is the combination of enthusiasm and optimism.
Right.
Which I have. So both of those things. And I think like you kind of have to be optimistic, or maybe some people who start businesses aren't optimistic, but you have to at some level believe that it's going to work, right? And on enthusiasm, I think enthusiasm helps with just about everything. But when I am consistently optimistic and enthusiastic, it can come across as naive, you know, or like kind of Pollyanna-ish, ignoring reality. And when I'm as standing up in front of my team and I'm saying, you know, I really think we can do this thing, and there's someone sitting there who has, I don't know what a different strength would be, a
critical thinking,
like
probably.
a skeptical one.
Yeah, critical thinking, potentially an overdrive, has the ability to like shoot
and
down
like
the optimism, right?
Yeah,
Could be that.
Yeah, there we go. I'm looking at it. Detail orientation and critical thinking, and thinking this is not real, right? Like this is bollocks, basically.
Yeah. Could be common sense as well, by the way, because that's like, when has this worked before, please? You're going, no, what? We don't need
like the whole point is it's innovation, guys. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's that. So I'm quite aware of this one. And yet being aware of it is not the same thing as being able to actually do anything about it. And so what I find I often do is I'll say like, you know, we're going to do this thing and it's going to be amazing and like it's going to be so great, and I'm like being optimistic and enthusiastic, and then I remember, or I see people's faces on the Zoom and I'm like, but you know, I know it might not work, it might fail, and then I'm kind of not sure where to go from there. Like
that's so good though, that you noticed that you may have, like, just reading the room, that actually, hold on a minute, like if I go further with this, then I'm just going to start switching people off. But
no, my style is I sort of start making self-aware jokes, or what are intended to be self-aware and intended to be jokes. But it can, I think it sometimes can be a bit of a kind of disorientating pendulum, you know, where you then kind of overcorrect, and it just ends up, if I don't prepare for this sort of thing, like consciously, it can end up either messy or disingenuous or mixed messages, because I'm being this kind of pendulum.
It's great. I mean, like, it's great as a spot, right? Because you're absolutely right. And if you prep it and you've gone through that work, that whole kind of logic cycle, then more likely it's going to be really good first time out, because you'll have consulted with the people who you know are going to bring that energy into the room anyway, you know, like, because actually they've got a really valuable point of view. And, you know, if you have them kind of poke holes in a plan or an idea, then it's probably going to be a more robust idea anyway. But you know, what are you going to do if you kind of find yourself in a situation where you feel the optimism and enthusiasm rising in you? Then you start reading the room and going, okay, I'm going to have to just acknowledge that this isn't everyone's perspective. You know, I think you can give yourself a break on that, you know, like.
I think the other thing, I mean, the thing that does work for me on this is, again, partnering with other people who have different strengths. So what quite often happen is there'll be someone in my team who's done some detailed thinking, and they're presenting something. And it might be, let's say something hasn't worked. Let's say we're off track in something, and they'll be presenting something and they'll say, well, we're off track in these 3 things. This one here is going all right, and this one here we're actually beating on. And here's our plan to improve these 3 things. And they might deliver that in quite a measured tone. And then what I find I can do is I can basically bring the energy at the end, kind of wrap around it and go, what an incredible piece of work. Thank you so much. What a great platform for improving. Yes, we're off track in those 3 things, but that 5th one, we're knocking it out of the park. That's amazing. Well done, this person and this person and this person. That 4th one, I'm feeling good about that. I don't know, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But how good is it that we know exactly where we need to be focusing, which is those 3 things. We've got such clarity, and thank you so much. And I kind of do it's basically hand wavy, but like bringing a bit of hype.
Thank you for bringing that example. It's such a good example about how you can deploy those strengths really effectively in that context. You know, so maybe It's not all the time with every presentation, with every single thing that you're putting across, but at the right time, in the right moment, no one can do it better, because you know those strengths are going to bring the energy, and people are going to want to go away with a positive message. Even if it's a positive message about a not so positive thing, there's still this sense that you're bringing that we can do this, like that we've thought about it, that we've identified the problem, and we now know what we're going to do next, but like leaving with a message of hope, essential, right, from a leader, and essential for people to hear, but not with it feeling over optimistic, because actually you've heard a balanced point of view. Love it. Right, I'm going to move us on, if that's okay. I'm going to talk about recruitment. So thinking about recruiting the best nannies at Koru Kids, and you've hired more than 10,000. That's 10,000 humans into Koru Kids, right? So, I mean, that's a large data set if we were going to get a bit geeky about it. So I'm really keen to understand how you go about doing that, right? So how do you find the best nannies you possibly can? And how do you get a read on their strengths, the watch outs, like what have you found out in that whole experience of recruiting so many people?
Yeah. With so many people, we have been able to do a lot of tests, and we're constantly doing A/B tests and a lot of qual and quant to figure all this stuff out. And we actually, so one thing we recently found out, this is hot off the press. In fact, it's possibly a trade secret, but I am actually going to tell you. So we did a massive quant look back at we identified two groups of our nannies who had worked with families, and through feedback we basically identified what are the worst performing 10% and the best performing 10%, and then what are some of the characteristics that they each had. And there was one word when we looked into the feedback, because we get a lot of kind of written feedback from families about what they absolutely loved about the top performing 10%. And that one word actually blew me away when I heard it. It dwarfed all other words. We did it as a word cloud, and there was one massive word, and that word was kind. And the reason that stuck out to me was because from the earliest days of Koru Kids, when I have done job ads for people to join the Koru Kids team, we have used that word kind in the job title.
Brilliant.
So we've said kind, like product designer, needed for Koru Kids team, that sort of thing. And so what we have actually done is we've built an internal team that is genuinely incredibly kind, and I think that's important. Not because, by the way, not because I actually thought it would help. I mean, I didn't think it would harm our performance, but it was literally just because I wanted to work in that place. So it was, one of the greatest luxury as a founder is you get to just hire the people that you want to work with. And so one of the things that we're thinking about right now, and I do not have the answer, is how do we attract more kind people? And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be bringing that. We're actually going to be talking to nannies in our marketing about that as a strength. And this is an hypothesis that I have, is that there are not that many jobs where kindness is celebrated and valued as a performance strength. And we want to be the place where, if you are a kind person, because I think, it's a tough world out there, and often the message about kindness is like you're a bit of a mug, you're going to get taken advantage, you're naive, you're over trusting, but this is a place where kindness is celebrated and we care about it. And so we have done campaigns. You said, how do we find people? We haven't done this kindness one yet, but we have in the past done other ones around that kind of related around like caring strengths and things like being able to really identify. So we wanted to find people who were parents whose kids had left home and were grown up, because we had a very strong hypothesis that they identified with with parents and would be like wonderful carers. And we identified this particular segment through a lot of research, qual research, and I hired an anthropologist, which was brilliant, and she went into people's houses and like did an ethnographic study on the basis of this. And one of the things she discovered was that there was a segment of people who were older women aged about 45 to about 65, whose kids were grown up. They might still live with them, but they were like over 20.
Mm-hmm.
And these women had been out of the workforce for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
didn't live in hugely high income households. And they felt that the feeling towards the workforce was very daunting. They were very daunted. They
Mm-hmm.
wanted to earn something extra. Now the kids were grown, but they still had very significant community responsibilities, and they couldn't work full time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were terrified of being laughed at by a 29-year-old who thought that they weren't very good at like tech.
Mm.
That was their feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we discovered was that when we put our job in front of them, the message we could give to those people was, this is your place where you are so valued. All of the skills, you think you have no skills, which couldn't be more wrong. So many skills. All of the skills that you've been building up over the last 15, 20 years. You're an incredible cook. You're so caring. You're so loving. You understand how important it is to be there at the school gate at 3:30. You know what that 5-year-old would be feeling and how much of a disaster it would be if you're not there on time. Like, these are incredible skills. Your place is with us. Apply to us. And so we built that into all of our messaging and nurture and imagery and everything. And it was an immensely successful campaign.
Yeah, right. And so actually you were saying you don't have the answer as to how you can attract and then recruit in people who have those qualities, those capacities. But actually that's so much part of it. Like how you put your messaging out there, how you communicate, making sure that's consistent so that the employer brand is really clear, that every single channel that people see, they're hearing and seeing kindness. But it's beyond that. And it's, describing it in the way that you just did with that real granularity, which, by the way, I was getting emotional hearing. Because if you're a parent and you've done that stuff, you feel those feelings, and it's almost there's an element of, if you heard that and you heard that that's a place you could go and work, you get that back again, even though that time has gone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then once they apply, we look for, there's a bit more of a boring answer around, like, we look for really good communication skills. We look for commitment. We look for passion for childcare. We've got checklists of things that we look for. But actually, most of the battle is finding the right people and getting to them to apply, actually.
Yeah. So absolutely. Which is all about the attraction stuff. It's about the messaging you're putting out there and the campaigning work again, right? Like, and that in itself is a purpose, like it's really important that we get these people coming to us, because it's really important that we can deliver the best childcare in the world. And we know how to do it. So coming back to strengths, right? And you and I were talking about this a little bit, like last time we spoke. And again, there is no actual proper defined answer on this, but I wonder if there's certain strengths you would look for if you were going to use that as a lens, that you would say they have to have that one, or whether it's more, actually, whichever strengths you have, you can get that outcome. We're not really looking for strengths here. We're looking more for a value, right? Like, it's the value of kindness, or, like that has to be something that runs deep within you. As well as maybe having some of these qualities or experiences, as you've just described, that can be super helpful, because you can partly self-select out if you've had those experiences and gone, glad that's all over, don't want to continue with that anymore, but those aren't the people that you're looking for. So I just wonder if and how strengths plays into this at all.
When I'm looking at the wheel right now, and it's hard to say that any of these wouldn't be helpful in a nanny. Like, they're all great. I mean, if I had to choose one or two, I would say the most important would be compassion and empathy. Probably empathy being the most important one. And the reason for that is you're working with children whose rationality is not developed, and I think it's the ability to imagine, put yourself in the shoes of a child and imagine how things are from their perspective. I think is probably, like, if I were to choose one thing, it would be that. But everything else, I mean, certainly all the emotional stuff, emotional control, enthusiasm is great. Optimism, definitely. Resilience is a hard job. self-confidence maybe a bit less. Persuasiveness, you need a lot with kids. Relationship building, yes. Decisiveness, yes. When you need to be making efficiency, yes. Flexibility for the parents. Initiative, yes. Maybe results focus, I don't know. I think it's maybe a bit more about the journey. Self-improvement is kind of like an enabler to all the other ones. Common sense, yes. Creativity, of course. Detail orientation, yes. Maybe not strategic mindedness. Critical thinking can be very important when, if you're sitting with them doing homework. If you're helping with the maths thing, that can be very important too. So I think there are different flavors of nanny, but I think you could get there with almost any of these strengths.
Brilliant, right? It's such a good answer. And yet you started with, those two that you felt, if you had to pick two, they would probably be compassion and empathy. And so and that kind of, I'm on the same page, right? I think there will be some strengths that you think those could be super helpful, super useful, and they'll actually help you have a better time because that is absolutely necessary within the role. But the rest of it is less to do with having the strength. It's to do with knowing that you have certain strengths and knowing how to use them in that context. Back to your optimism and enthusiasm as an example, at the end of a meeting, almost it doesn't matter which strengths you have. It's that that they're there and you know how to mobilize that energy when you need it in certain situations, and maybe how to blend certain strengths at certain times. Which is, exactly where we've arrived with, using strengths in a recruitment context. That's what you're looking for. Someone's ability to talk about themselves with clarity, knowing what they love and what they don't, and what they do about both, when they're facing challenge, and uncertainty, when they're kind of in an uncharted territory. So yeah, that's thank you. That's brilliant. And so I've got this other. We talked about entrepreneurship a little bit earlier. I just wonder if there's any more we can dig into there. Like, do you feel that there are certain strengths that you have to have if you want to be a successful entrepreneur? I'm conscious, like a lot of the people listening, some of them may have that drive to want to kind of break out, start their own thing, get behind their own idea, whatever it is, or they're already on that journey. So again, and maybe it's a different answer to the one we were just talking about with finding really good nannies, or maybe not. I don't know. What do you think?
Again, I look at these and I think every single one of them would be very useful.
Yeah.
All the relational ones, if you are building a team, if you're doing alone and just working on AI, just working with AI and you don't have a team, would you still need the relational ones? I think you have to build relationships with third-party partners, or with customers if you're selling to them at some point. So I think you can get away from the relational ones. You need those. Execution, that is literally what it is. That is everything.
Yeah.
You need to be decisive. You need to be efficient. Certainly initiative is almost the definition of getting something started. Self-improvement, again, like I said before, I think is an enabler of all other things. Results focus, that's certainly very useful. Again, I mean, all the thinking skills for sure, which is the whole quarter of them. And then the emotional ones, emotional control and resilience, very important on the founder journey. Optimism, I don't know why you would start anything if you didn't have some optimism. You just wouldn't. Enthusiasm, I feel like I do know some dour founders who are not necessarily less successful. So maybe you don't need that one. I'd say that because that's my one. But I also I definitely know a bunch of founders who do actually lack self-confidence. You wouldn't necessarily know it if you met them. You might think they were very self-confident, but I think imposter syndrome is extremely widespread. So I don't think you need that one. And emotional control, I think there's a lot of very famous, extremely successful founders who appear to lack emotional control. So maybe that one's optional.
Who are you talking about? I just can't imagine the various ones that pop immediately. Exactly. I mean, there's one in particular, but there are many, and like that. And it's very evident that their emotional control is just not there. And out of choice sometimes. It's like, actually I want people to know how I'm feeling about things. Like I don't want to keep that to myself. and kind of keep a facade on. I don't see the need for professionalism, or whatever it is that may be a value that's kind of driving that.
It's true. I mean, I actually am reasonably high on that one, but I think maybe if I had to choose one that you don't need, it might actually be that one.
Although
resilience is separately listed, so if you could get resilience, you maybe. I mean, it's nice. I think it's just it makes your life nicer if you have some emotional control, I think.
And I wonder if that's what you can use to give yourself the choice of dialing or turning off the optimism and enthusiasm in those moments where you're like, hold on a minute, I'm going to put that at the end. Because if you don't have that, it's going to be that much more difficult, to curb your enthusiasm, literally, in that situation. So yeah, I'm just, again, just an observation, like you have it, it's there as a bubbling under. I wonder if, and we know that this is true, right? That can give you choice around then, therefore, oh, let me read the room. Let me move to something else that's going to be more productive, or just go quiet for a minute, let the others talk. It may well be that's the case. So yeah, I mean, I am with you, right? I looked at yours, I looked at mine wheel-wise. We do share 4 of 7, top 7 strengths, but are those the 4 common strengths of all entrepreneurs? Hell no. Like every entrepreneur, if you profile them, they will look different. There may be some similarities. There may be some that pop up more often than others. But it's so much, again, it's about knowing that you have certain strengths, particularly, I think, with entrepreneurs, knowing where you don't, and then finding that energy elsewhere, particularly when you know that you need to get stuff done. You have to go and find and be prepared, right? Be vulnerable, know that you don't know everything, be humble, and find people who are going to be incredible, brilliant, genius-like at things that it just aren't for you. They're not energizing. You may be able to do them, but in the end, if you do too much of those things, it's going to drain the hell out of you. Bearing in mind, you're probably going to have to do all of it at the early stages anyway. So how are you going to keep yourself topped up energy wise? You're probably doing more of the stuff you love more of the time, and just minimizing the stuff that you really hate, but you have to do. Everyone has that, at the early stages. Okay. Anything more you'd like to share? Is there anything that you want to encourage people to go away and read or think about or consume, right? With all the things we've talked about, with all the interest that you have as well, like, or any campaign you want to get people to get on, right? Because bring that.
Yeah. So I people who, if they're interested in the kind of stuff I've been talking about, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn, and that's where I put most of my thoughts.
Right.
I like it.
So the campaign stuff that would be there.
Campaign stuff goes there, and that's that's my thing. And obviously, if they need a nanny and they live in the UK, they should definitely check out Koru Kids.
Yeah, fully agree with you. Any final words you'd like to leave with us before we close for today?
No, just thank you very much. It's been very interesting and useful, actually, to reflect on using strengths. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, likewise. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. So yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. And until next time, everybody, stay strong.